For over 10 years, I couldn't get my productions to sound how I wanted, so I buried myself in online tutorials trying to figure out why, and even having some of the same tools as other producers and mixers I envied, my productions weren't coming even close. I've heard the term referencing get thrown around, and I thought I was referencing the right way myself, but I was totally wrong, and over time developed a referencing system that would help me produce any desired result. I'm excited to announce that you can now use this same system yourself in our new course, The Magical Guide to Referencing. This gives you the exact framework I've used and successfully taught hundreds of students through the years. If you're ready to stop chasing your mixing tail in circles and ready to understand any mix you hear to replicate those same results for yourself, you can find a link to the Magical Guide to Referencing in the description wherever you're listening. See you there, my friends. Hello and welcome to Working in Music Sucks. My name is John Maciel, and for almost 2 decades I've been working in the audio recording industry. I've worked with producers and mixers like Bo Rochelle, Joey Sturgis, and Josh Newell, and countless others on records with bands like Era, Census Fell, and Moose Blood. And along this journey, I've also worked with 2 of the biggest music educational companies where I helped thousands of aspiring engineers achieve their dreams of making music production a fulfilling full-time career. But as great as that sounds, to be honest, the first 10 years of working in music sucked. I started this podcast to talk about what sucks about working in music so others like myself who love music production and want to wake up every morning fulfilled and driven to making records people love can do just that. Working in music sucks, but with what we talk about on this podcast, it doesn't have to any longer. If that sounds like your cup of coffee, then you're in the right place, my friends. Let's get into it.
Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Working in Music Sucks podcast. In today's episode, I just want to take a step back from all the advice, tips, and tricks that I usually talk about, because I realized that I haven't really gone into detail about who I am exactly, why I started this podcast in greater detail than like the first episode, which was kind of like a skim. And it goes much further than what I think I initially talked about in like the first episode. So I just want to give more of my backstory and just remind people, if you have been listening but you haven't gone back to the first episode, just kind of where I come from, who I am, why I decided to make this podcast, and kind of tell you about the company in general and the mission and the goal and everything that I hope to accomplish with the brand. So I want to start off first by talking about Plugin Alley, which is like the parent company that I own and have. And Plugin Alley used to be an e-commerce site where I would resell plugins, and I got into it not knowing how to build a website and all that stuff. And I just decided to put the e-commerce side to rest for a while. I may bring it back in the future. I've learned a lot since I started, and this was back in like 2017. And I changed Plugin Alley to be a media company because I always wanted to have a platform where I can teach people the stuff that I've learned from pro mixers and being in the music environment and music industry, and kind of funnel in a way that I haven't seen done. So back in late 2021, I decided like, hey, I'm going to bring back Plugin Alley, but I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel, but have always been terrified to start a YouTube channel. And I don't know how to edit video. I didn't know how to do all that stuff. But if it was one of those things, just like when I got into music, it was pulling me. So Plugin Alley then became a media company. I have the Plugin Alley like regular main channel. And then the Working in Music Sucks podcast is one of the podcasts for Plugin Alley. In the future, I'm going to have different types of podcasts. It'll be like a network, just like I plan on having different types of YouTube channels. It's going to be a full-on media thing, but it takes small steps. But the whole goal of this particular podcast under the Plugin Alley umbrella is on the main channel. I talk about tips and tricks that pros use for their mixing and tell stories and all that type of stuff. But I really wanted to have an outlet to where I can just rant and talk about things that I've experienced and things I wish I would have known and people would have told me as I navigated the music industry. So that's why I named it The Working in Music Sucks, because it sucks that there's this like invisible wall that basically says you can't get over this wall until you've paid your dues and learned the hard way. And yes, with audio and music education, it's getting easier to climb that wall, but there's still a wall there, and people still are apprehensive about sharing their knowledge, where I feel that it's just like with school. Like everyone starts off getting the same lesson in the classroom. Some people get it better and faster than others, while others don't, or they don't apply things. And I feel like with music and the music industry in general, a lot of people like to hoard things like their secrets, and they don't want people to get one up on them. But the thing is, it's like we're all different, right? So I just hate that stigma. I've never enjoyed it. I've always strayed away from people in the industry who have that stigma, and just, I'd rather not learn from them, just because it's like if I go and I teach someone else that thing, they'll feel like I betrayed them or something like that. So I just try to avoid it. But the Working in Music Sucks podcast is under the Plug and Ellie umbrella. And if you like this podcast, you will probably really enjoy what I do on the main YouTube channel. And it's very different than what you're getting here. Over here, it's like the serious version of me, because it's like an advice channel, whereas the other one, I'm doing advice and tips and tricks, but also I have fun with the video. And I don't think very many people on the music side of producing records, YouTube-ish world or whatever, are doing quite exactly what I'm enjoying doing in my own videos. So I've started this whole company as a way to just give back and help people like my old self that I wish someone would have told me, and I wouldn't have gone the hard way, and also given me the brutal, honest truth at times. So that's where I'm here today. And before I got to where I am today, way, way back in the day, I was a guitar player, and I had dreams of, a kid from a small town, get in a band and do big things and tour the world. And if you have ever been in a band or are in a band, you know that being in a band is it's like having a very dysfunctional second family, if you will. And getting everyone on the same page, everyone wanting the same thing, and keeping that steadfast mentality for years is very, very difficult, because life changes, people change, financial hardships or financial opportunities happen. There's so many variables to being in a band. But for several years, I played in bands, always like the lead guitar player. I was always like the producer of the band, always taking people's ideas and turning them into songs. I was a master at Guitar Pro 4, and then, Guitar Pro 5 and 6 and 7. And Guitar Pro 5, I think, was like the OG one. And I think most people who use Guitar Pro remember how good. I think it was 5. That was like, it was just, it ran so smoothly compared to the newer versions. But I was always curious about why records that I loved sounded the way they sounded. And, I grew up listening to like Blink-182, Sum 41, like although like pop punk was like the first doorstep into guitar and learning all the riffs. And then I just like, there was when I was growing up, there was like the Orange County hardcore scene, and like bands like 18 Visions, Atreyu, Avenged Sevenfold were all coming out of there. And I got really into those bands and started playing heavier music. And around this time, Linkin Park was finally starting to come out with Hybrid Theory had been out for like a year, but it was starting to get traction. I remember Hot Topic had like these little sampler discs that you used to be able to get for free. And I remember, or maybe I thought they were free and they cost money. Now I think about it. Anyways, that's when I first got one step closer. So that was like opening me to the heavier world of guitar playing, which led me to, the Metallicas, Shadows Fall, a bunch of like metal bands. And I just wanted to be in a band that I could solo and play riffs. And I just really, really loved writing, like playing guitar all day, every day is all I did for years. And, I couldn't get into a band, funny enough. Like bands just kept telling me no. I wasn't good enough, or there was always a reason to not allow me to join the band. So I finally decided, like, why don't I just start my own band? Why am I trying to join all these people's bands? And it was really funny because I started a band with my friends, and we took like 6 months, I think, to like write our first 4-song EP. We did a bunch of covers at first. We were kind of figuring each other out in terms of a band, and we were just having fun, but we knew the ultimate goal was to like do an EP and play a big opening show. And we did all that, and it was really crazy. Like the first venue we played, it was so funny. The town I'm from, there weren't many venues, but there was like this old arcade and then like this buffet Chinese food restaurant that like bands would tour through. It was just such a crazy thing that people would play this Chinese restaurant, but it's like looking back at it now, it's like such a great story. Um, but our first show, like I don't know how we figured out how to do our marketing, but we were very like ominous and like mysterious, and people knew that we were coming. We'd go out to shows and hand out flyers. And we were really excited. We did the work and we knew we wanted a huge turnout. And the only way we were going to get a huge turnout is to kind of create this mystique and copy what other bands were doing. We played the show. It was huge. And then, we played a bunch of shows locally and they all did really, really well. And then what happens when bands, even at small levels, start doing well? Egos. We were all getting egos that we just couldn't cash. I was definitely a terrible one because I was doing so much of like the record producing and putting the songs together and making everyone's ideas and riffs happen. I kind of was like the egocentric maniac of the band. As looking back now, I'm very honest about how terrible I probably was to work with, and I was that person in the band, and like I hated when people wanted to change things. Eventually that band ended, and then I went through a series of other bands, and they all did fairly well, and we wrote great songs. And in one commonality between all these bands was me and my friend at the time. He was the bass player of my first band. We ended up always being in bands together. So it was like we were a duo essentially. He got better at songwriting. His ideas were good, and we just really worked well songwriting wise together. So he was like always a part of whatever project I went on to, or whatever project he went to, I went with him. And eventually they decided to join the military, and they didn't even tell me until they were about to leave, which was kind of crazy. But anyways, I was kind of like, well, I'm getting tired of being in and out of bands, because with being in bands, it takes so much time and effort to like practice the songs, write new songs, and no one knows what they're doing when it comes to marketing, and no one wants to pull in their weight. I was getting really, really tired of it at this point. And I knew I was feeling like I need a break from bands, because I'd been going hard for like 5 or 6 years being in bands and stuff. I think it was 5 or 6 years. So I decided that while my friend was away, what I was going to do was learn how to actually use recording equipment and stuff like that. So I went to Barnes & Noble, I bought a bunch of recording magazines, and just started reading what mixers and producers were talking about, the gear. Like, it all went way past my head. I had no idea what any of it was, but one thing that kept coming up was Pro Tools, like Pro Tools rig, Pro Tools this, and like I was like, okay, whatever Pro Tools is, every professional that I talk to talks about recording into Pro Tools or sending the tape to Pro Tools. Like, this is obviously the recording software, and at the time it was like using bootleg Fruity Loops, or Adobe had like, I think it was Audition or something. They had like a very primitive recording software. And then there was like Sonar. There was just very primitive, like basically pirated versions of software that my friends would get install on my PC. And that's what I was trying to learn on. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, if I could find old demos, they would not sound good, and I had like a Boss recorder. I was recording our practices, just trying to figure out how do I place this little tablet that records in the right place in the room so that we can all kind of hear each other, and then the singer can go and like write vocals and lyrics to it. Like, I was that person, right? And that led me to going to Google and researching like what is Pro Tools. And then like when I saw it cost thousands of dollars, I was like, oh, I can't like buy a Pro Tools rig. Like, no shit, the professionals use it. Like, that's crazy expensive. I was like, what am I going to do? I want to record and I want to use what the pros use, because if I ever work at a pro studio or for a pro, I want to know how to operate the same thing that they operate. Because even back then I was thinking like, I want to use the same thing that the pros use, because I want to put myself eventually in a position to do that. That led me to, I think it was Pro Tools LE 7.4 at the time. It was a huge release because they had just released it with this thing called Elastic Audio, which allows you to bend audio. And I just remember that in Pro Tools LE, you could only have 5 inserts and 5 sends. It was extremely stripped down, but that's what I had. And I don't even think you could have more than like 12 buses or something at a time. It was, looking back, it was so crazy limited. And it came with like an Mbox 2, which was an audio interface. And I would have friends and people that I knew, like they would come over. We would record acoustic guitar covers of like Taking Back Sunday songs and Sublime. I would mess with like making beats in Pro Tools, just trying to learn the software and have fun. And like for the longest time, I had a thing like anytime I didn't have work, it was spend a day writing a song. It doesn't matter how the song turns out, but spend the day writing a song, and it would force me to get better. And I bought a bunch of Pro Tools books, and I eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I'm okay at using this software, but to make the records that I hear, how do I do that? And like, I remember this so clearly, which led me to this decision. At the time, Seosin's self-released record came out, and the intro, there's like one song that has like a fast swell and like a fade in and a fade out. And I was like using the fades and trying to change the fade curves and move the edit around to get it to sound like what it sounded like on the record. And it took me forever. And after I kind of got it like 60% there, I was like, it is crazy what these pros know how to do. Oh my God. And then the Used had another record where there's like a tape stop effect. And I remember the tape stop effect just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, like this took me so long. I can't imagine how long that would take. Like, I need to know what the pros know. And like now like tape stop is easily like lo-fi slowdown in Audio Suite. And the other thing was actually automation fade-ins. It's super simple, but to me at the time listening, it was like crazy hard. But I just remember thinking like, I want to be like that good. I want to be that good at mixing. I didn't know it was mixing. I was like, I want to be that good at mixing and producing. Like I have to be this good. If I am not this good, my records will never sound this good. And what's the point of learning how to do this if I can't go to this level? And I also remember reading like on Sound and Sound magazine, I think it was like the Jonas Brother engineer or Lady Gaga engineer at the time. And they were just talking about the little things they were doing. And I was like, I want to be a good enough engineer that like I could work for Disney, because like Disney makes all their singers sound amazingly good and you know they're not. So like that's where my head was at with this. I was like, that's where I want to go, which led me to discover like Full Sail, the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, and a few other like colleges and schools around. And at this time, I needed to figure out what I was going to do after junior college. And I was like, I didn't want to go to school anymore. I thought it was dumb. But I lived with my parents, and they were like, well, if you're not in college, you can't like live at the house. And I was like, okay, well, shit, this sucks, because like, fine. Like I was like, I will continue going to school, but I want to, at least for a year, do music, and then I'll go back to finishing school. So that was like, that was the agreement we came upon, but they weren't going to help pay for music school. Like I had to do that myself. And I almost went to the Musicians Institute, like, and to this day, I'm glad it worked out this way. So I got everything filled out. They approved me. They set my orientation date and everything. And I drove down to Hollywood. First of all, I lived 2 hours away. I was from a very small town, and that was like only my second or third time in Hollywood. And it was by myself this time. Actually, no, I think it was like my fifth or sixth, but it was the first time I was there alone, and in LA, like Sunset, like it was just a different experience. And I remember going through all the stuff for orientation and stuff, and then you get to the financial aid office at the end, and they looked at my file and they're like, oh, so your payment was actually never made, and there was no application for the loan. So you actually will not be starting. Like, we don't know how you got this far. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, no, like there are no funds released. There's no payment showing. Like, you actually should have never gotten an orientation invite. We don't know what occurred, but you're not permitted to continue. And I was just like, what the fuck? I was just so confused. And I was like, well, my dad said he took care of it. They're like, yeah, no. So I drove 2.5 hours because it was like a weekday. And now I was gonna have to learn what LA afternoon traffic was like, which was like a 4-hour drive home. And I just remember being so pissed because I think I was going for music business school, actually, not recording school. Yeah, I was going for music business school because my goal, okay, it's coming back. This is like years ago. That's how old I am right now. Um, I was learning how to record music, but the goal was to learn how to record music, be in my own band, find a band in Los Angeles, but we like intern at a label, learn what it's like to like get records on a label and all that stuff, and then get my band signed, or me do a record, hire people, get that record signed, and then I would be on a label and then I can hire musicians. Like that was where that was what my mindset was. I remember it was music business. Because I didn't want to do guitar and I didn't feel like I was going to get enough like console time or whatever for mixing for it to make sense. And I already understood that. That's why one gripe with audio schools is that to get good at audio, you have to be hands-on and you have to be in an environment that will allow you to do so. And I already knew like MI was probably not going to be that. And I had some friends who had done the guitar school, but they didn't do anything. They just knew a bunch of theory. Not saying that all musicians are like that, but I had seen that. So I was like, the music business side is like, that's my ticket. Like I can handle all the other aspects, but this is the one I don't have an in. I don't know how to get in there. But yeah, didn't work out. So I had to drive home and I was pissed at my dad, for not sending me any financial aid work. So I needed to come up with something. And through that, lucky enough, I found like a trade school of sorts in San Diego that would give you Pro Tool certifications, at the time, Waves audio certifications and all that. So I was like, okay, cool. I am going to actually do the trade school thing because then it's like for a week, I go in for like Pro Tools, take a test, Pro Tool certified, update it every year, tight. And I can do that with all their certifications. With like at the time, the Icon desk, I did that, the Icon. I did Pro Tools and audio or music and post. And then I did like the recording, the mixing, the mastering. Like I would literally take a week or two. I would convince my employer to let me have like a week or two off of work, and I would spread it out through months throughout like a 12 or 15 month period. And I would just, luckily I had friends in San Diego at the time who would let me crash on their living room floor while I did these week or 2 weeks, programs and get certifications and hands-on. And I'm glad I did that because this, like trade school was small enough to where like, I'm talking like 10 to 20 kids in a classroom at a time, if even that. It was like, you could talk to the engineers. It was actually a working studio as well, which was super sick. And, alongside all that, it had an SSL console as well, and a bunch of like old gear, had a mic, like all the mics. And what was cool was you could use the studios when no one else was when you signed up. So I got to actually like mix in like these nice rooms, and you know, the instructors would come in and be like, what are you working on? And then like actually give you some pointers, which was like my first real like, oh my God, like that is so cool that they saved me like a year's worth of trial and error with like this trick. Like I was like, they were so nice to give me that information. And like these little things were planted towards my future. The staff and everyone really, really liked me. And I just remember the engineers and I always, like, everyone had conversations with them, but our conversations would always like, you know, when you're vibing with somebody and the conversation goes on much longer than you thought it would naturally, and neither one wants it to kind of end. It was always like that. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I'm in the environment with my people. I understand this world without having ever been a part of it. Luckily, this school also did internships. So I applied, I don't think I got the internship the first time, but then I got the second time and I interned there for like a year. And mind you, I was living 2.5 hours away in another town. So I got an internship to intern once, maybe twice a week. So I would go and spend like all day at a studio. And I'm talking like I would be on the road by like 6:30 to be there by like 9. And then I would literally stay until, okay, we have to close now. So sometimes I would get home at like 1 or 2 a.m. and then go to work the next day. When you're young, you can do that because like it's just a whole different, your body's totally different. Like now when I think back at it, I'm like the present me can never do that. Like I'm past that prime of my life in terms of how my stamina will keep up. But I'm glad I did those things because I got to like people would come in the studios. There was just so much happening, and doing that for like I want to say I did that for 6 months internship, and then that internship led to a former instructor was looking for an assistant, and then I was luckily everyone gave me a recommendation to this studio owner, and he like interviewed me and a few other people, and then he called me and was like, yeah, like I would actually like to give this like a 1-month trial, make sure it's like the right fit. And yeah, I did that for another 6 months. I actually moved to San Diego. Like I quit my job and moved to San Diego on that one. And long story short, didn't work out. And I was literally so tired at this point of all the driving, hustling, trying to get client. Like it's so crazy how people will pay you a certain amount to like record at your home because they assume it's a discount. But when you're actually like in the studio world trying to get people to come into a studio and your price tag goes up, it's so insane how some people don't see the value in like having better gear accessible. They just think about the price tag and not really the talent and the gear. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be really the talent. But it's like it's like, hey, for this much money, we can be in this studio for this many hours and we have access to this equipment that is so good compared to doing it at home at a studio that doesn't have anything. But if that's your concern, fine. Like we'll take a few bucks off and we can do it at my place. So I was just tired of like the hustle basically and not getting help from anyone. What bothered me about working at studios was there was no sense of like, hey, here's this gig, take the paycheck too. It was like, hey, here's this gig, here's a couple bucks. But it wasn't like I wasn't getting paid for the gig. I was getting paid like on the side from whatever engineer was handing me something. And I was just like, yo, this is whack. Like, and I remember having a conversation with an engineer once and I was like, I need to start making like real money and I can't. And they were like, well, you need to think in terms of this and that. And that I was like, all I'm hearing is that you don't make money. So how are you going to help me make money? And that's when I realized, okay, you need to go find people who are like abundantly doing well, making records at the level you want to make, because these people are working at a local level, meaning they're fighting for scraps of whatever can come in. It's like, and it's not really helping a resume. It's just paycheck to paycheck. Essentially, you're just trading in like another 9 to 5 or part-time job that's paycheck to paycheck for essentially a different type of 9 to 5. But this one is not as rewarding and it's not moving your career upwards. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, no one's telling me like this is how, like this kind of sucks and this is how it is. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm tired. I'm burnt out. And for a year and a half, I literally did not record and I didn't play guitar. Like I just took time off completely. Didn't do music. I mean, I picked up my guitar here and there, but I didn't record anything. Like I just needed a break from the world after all the money I spent, which was like, I think $15,000 or $20,000 in music. And that all came out of my pocket from working. I just needed to put it to the side. And then I remember I got the itch to be in a band again. I forgot what I was listening to that put me into the band mode again. And after months of like, I knew I also was gonna, if I was going to be in a band, I was going to be in I needed to be in like an LA band, like a band that was doing things. So I found a couple of Orange County bands. We didn't really vibe. I already knew like going in I was going to vibe. I found like an Inland Empire band. They kind of did me dirty, but it is what it is. And then I found, and all these bands I found through Craigslist at the time, which is like now thinking about it, like I don't know if I would ever go meet a band that I just found off of Craigslist anymore. I think that's super sketch nowadays. I had like, we need to meet on Facebook Marketplace or something where I could see your face. Like it's just so crazy thinking about how it was like not even that long ago. And I found this like Craigslist ad for this band and they were based in LA. but they had moved from Texas. So I was like, oh, so like they're not LA people. They're like Texans living in LA. So that's going to be interesting. I hit them up. They liked all my past work. I sent I had a reel, and all the bands they put in their ad were bands that I loved already. So I was like, okay, cool. This seems like this seems like a really good match. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I had sold all my guitar gear at this point. All I had was an Avid 11 rack. I had a Avid 11 rack, and I think I had a Wolfgang guitar. This story is so funny now that I think about it. So they send me these songs they want me to learn. They don't send me tabs or anything, and I learn the songs. I go down to LA and I show up with this rack. It's like a 2-foot tall rack, but all that's in it is an Avid 11 rack. I don't even have a power amp. I literally am like, do you guys have a PA? And they're like, yeah. I was like, cool. And I plug my 11 rack into the PA, my Behringer footboard into the 11 rack. I was like, this is my setup. I sold everything. I figure if my skills are good enough and I get into this band, I will buy equipment again. But until then, this is what I got. And I told them my whole story. I was like, honestly, I took it right. Well, recording. They really liked it that I went to audio school, that I recorded. But I just remember their faces like looking at like, did he just really show up to this band practice with an 11 rack? I knew how to set up on the PA. We play the songs, and literally we play the set 3 times through. They had no complaints. By the end of the practice, they were like, yeah, we think, we'll come back down, but we're if you want the gig, we feel good about the vibe and everything. So I got into the band, and within the next couple of months, I bought a bunch of gear again. Started recording our practices live, producing and all that stuff. And I was with that band for like 2 years. And one thing about me that's like a positive or negative is I am very I'm super creative. I have scatterbrain. I've gotten better at controlling it and funneling it, but I am also very, very business oriented. So it's like both my left and right side of my brain constantly fight, because as a creative, you want to be free to create and not be confined. But as the logistical business side, you're like, oh, I should probably, approach this from a different angle or think this through. So in a band with a bunch of creatives, and it's not my band, with another personality who, for all intents and purposes, was the band leader, having a personality like mine that isn't afraid of confrontation. And if I think something is the wrong business decision and move to say something, you do that long enough, two opposing forces can't be there, even though I have the best intentions and I'm thinking practically, being that person when you're not given the authority, it just creates I don't want to say hostility, but definitely tension. And it got to the point where a tour idea was proposed, and I was just looking at the logistics because we had just gone to San Francisco for 2 weeks to record a record, and how no one could afford that. Basically, the whole reason that record got done was essentially I gave a loan to the band to pay me back within a couple months. There was a whole thing, but I was like, okay, I have the money. I'll front the deposit, and then I'll pay the rest, and the band pays me back within 3 months after recording. And I didn't have to do that, but I loved the band and the music so much and I knew that we needed to get this done, and I was in a position that could do it. I did it. And when we got back 3 or 4 months later, I got paid and everything, but then the proposal to, hey, we should go on tour in the summer or something like that for a month. And we hit these dates, this dates, and as long as we make this much, this much, as soon as someone says, as long as we make this much, you're betting on so much uncertainty there. Gas, food, board, van breaks down, we don't have a trailer. In my head, I'm thinking numbers and all these things happening. And I'm like, we couldn't even pay for studio time unless I basically fronted it. And I also paid for a hotel room for me to stay out there for 2 weeks. or a week and a half, whatever it was. Like, I paid for a hotel room for me, and I'm not a jerk. So when they asked like what I was doing, I was like, oh, I'm renting a hotel room for 2 weeks. Like, I'm not slumming it. Like, their plans were like they were going to stay in their car. And I was like, yeah, no, like, I'm not doing any of that. That just wasn't my thing. They, I wasn't gonna be a jerk about it. So I was like, you guys can crash too. Just like buy me like dinner or something. It was like in my head, I was thinking like we couldn't, like the band couldn't afford to do that. I could afford to go on tour. Like I already knew, I was like, I could afford to go on tour easily. But this band can't afford to go on tour. I'm like, so I, stayed in my concerns, and within a month or two of that, it was like, yeah, we don't want to kick you out, but we don't think it's like a good situation any further. So, I was asked to leave the band, and at that point, I wasn't upset either. Like I kind of felt it coming. But when they did it like that, I was like, okay, cool. So I don't want to be in a band again unless I am in control of the band and I hire people to be in the band with me. And at that point, I was like, I'm going 100% in on recording. Like I've been kind of tiptoeing around everything, always having the band angle. Like that stuff's all cool, but I want to just make records. So I got back into recording and mixing, buying gear again. And I knew my mixing skills weren't great. For all intents and purposes, I feel pretty strong and good as like a producer and a recording engineer. But when it came to mixing, I was like, this is the thing I'm not like that I want to be great at, but I'm just not good at. And what ended up happening was I joined, I found like a couple of like online courses, which was crazy because when I first started all this, there was like nothing besides mixing it like a record from Charles Day or something. That's like only the OGs are going to know that one. And I think like the Art of Mixing from Mixer Man, that was like really like the only resources back when I started. But I found a company that was teaching people how to mix. And it was like, we are going to mix a song from scratch and you get to watch. And the company at the time was called Nail the Mix. They are now called the Unstoppable Recording Machine. And I subscribed just to check it out. It was at the time the band Chunk, No Captain Chunk. And it was everything was very primitive at that time. And I just remember being blown away. And what led me to discovering this was Joey Sturgis had mixed a couple of records. We Came as Romans and The Devil's Wears Prada. He had mixed those records, and he was kind of pushing the metalcore side of things. And when I would drive down to San Diego, I was listening to his records up and down this like huge trip. So for like 2.5 hours, I was listening to his records, just wondering how he was doing these sounds. Like at the time, I didn't realize like sound design mixed with recorded audio, like gunshots. Like I didn't understand that's what was happening at the time. So when I started Googling, I found this Nail the Mix thing. And then I found like Creative Live and all that stuff. And I think once I joined the Nail the Mix program, within a couple months, they changed the name to Unstoppable Recording Machine. They added like a different type of subscription service, all that. But within 3 months, I was so active in the Facebook community because like I was just hungry to know everything. So I was just constantly talking to people. There was this whole world of engineers I had never really been part of. Like I'd been in audio school, but these were like, not everyone's like a hardcore nerd. These were hardcore nerds like I was. So I was like, okay, this is like super sick. But yeah, within 3 months, I was hit up to like become a moderator, which is basically just like make sure everyone's like having a good time talking. Anything comes up that's a concern, send it over to like the owners and let them deal with it type thing. And eventually, it turned into an admin role, which is the same thing. But now instead of just focusing on chats, focus on like the main Facebook group. And like I did that for a really, really long time and growing the relationship with the owners, that eventually led to being asked to like, would I be a one-on-one coach, which is was part of their service where once a month, anyone who is subscribed to their subscription service or one of their subscription tiers could book a 20-minute like coaching call to get help on mix crits, their record producing, whatever they needed help with. And at this time, actually, I should slow back down. So I was with the community and I was an admin, and every month a different mixer would come on and mix a song from scratch. And one of the months happened to be Seosin with Beau Rochelle, who's the guitar player and the founding member. And what was really cool about it is at the time I was tiptoeing about moving back to actually moving to LA to pursue trying to intern at a studio. And when this Nail the Mix happened, they did like a meetup where like Beau and a bunch of other LA producers were going to be at this place, and subscribers could come and hang out with the owners and all these producers and stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to this event because I need to network, and maybe I can build a relationship with someone so that I can intern essentially and try to get some gigs. And at this time I had sold everything again. If I could tell you how many times I've sold all my shit just to start over. That's why I'm never scared. Like if I were to sell all this stuff today, I wouldn't care because I know I could build it. I've done it so many times. It's because when I'm done with something, I sell everything because I'm like, I'm done with it. I'm only keeping the bare essentials. So at this time I only had I had headphones and a Apogee Firewire interface that I was connecting Firewire via to Thunderbolt adapter to my MacBook Pro. Like I didn't have any gear. I had plugins and an iLock, and I was like, yeah, this Apogee is all I need. What I'm doing. Oh my God. So I go to the meetup, and I'm a huge Seosin fan. I have the original EP. I meet Beau. He signs the EP for me. After that evening, a month later, he's looking for an intern. A bunch of people apply. One of my friends hits him up. Then he gets another internship, but he talks me up, and he's like, hit him up. I hit up Beau. A week later, I head out to LA just to hang and meet with him. It was a good fit. We seemed to vibe. He had a record coming up that he needed an assistant on. And at the end of the month, and within a week, I found a place to stay in LA, moved to LA. Like it literally happened really quick. And I got there, and the first record I work on is Era Neon, that record. And it was crazy to go from struggling to get good, decent work to now I'm working on a pro record with a band that I personally had been listening to. So that was really odd. And I helped on that record. And for the next 2 years, almost 3 years, I am an assistant mix engineer with Beau. And the reason I was with him so long was because it was the schedule was very accommodating. I loved the work that we were doing, and also I was approached to be the one-on-one coach with this other company that I had subscribed to that had been part of the reason I got to meet Beau in the first place. And I was able to give back to the community the way I was getting, because working with someone who's a mentor, it just propels your learning it by so much. It's crazy. So within a year of doing that, or a couple, maybe 9 months, I forgot the timeline, honestly. But anyways, I'm asked to do one-on-one coach, and I literally had to audition, which is okay. But I think a lot of people assumed I just got the role as a one-on-one coach. But no, I had to send one of the owners, I think 20 or 30 different mix crits of me helping someone else, recording me helping that person, and then sending them off so they can review it and give me notes on how to coach and talk to people. And after the 20th or 30th review, I was like, all right, if you want the gig, it's yours. So that, to me, it was okay, so I'm making money making records and helping people with stuff, with mixed techniques and things I wish someone would have told me. This is crazy, absolutely insane. So for the next 2 years, so it had to been like a year in, but for like 2 years, literally, this is what I was doing, like making records, teaching people how to make records for this company, for Ensemble Recording Machine. I did hundreds of one-on-one coaching calls, hundreds, and helped so many people win clients, fix mixes that clients weren't excited about, win the mix poll, like what's the word? Oh, win test mix situations. It was really crazy. It was really rewarding and really fun. And then the work was slowing down on the engineering side with Bo. And then the company was like, hey, we need a community manager, which would be someone who would handle managing support, the Facebook groups, the admins, and also with like sponsors and prizes and stuff like that. And mind you, like I had already been working with companies because of the e-commerce business, so I already knew a lot of people on that side of things at that time. And with Bo, I got to meet a lot of companies that wanted to work with him and et cetera. So I knew how to talk and work with companies, with brands and stuff like that. And it's a very acquired skill set to understand how to speak that language. But then I also understood the culture. So it was like I was in the world, and it was everything that, I wanted to learn how to run a website, how to build a business, how to do audio, because again, like it all comes back to where I'm at now with what the mission was. And I did that for, I think, 2 years. And I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. And I was like, you know what? I just hit a point where I was like, man, I am not happy right now. Like, why am I not happy? I'm doing music. I'm checking all these boxes. And then I realized like, oh, like you always wanted to like make records. You've done that. You always wanted to like learn how to build these businesses. You've done that. You didn't want to do a band anymore. It was like, I was checking all these things and realized like, oh, I'm like in a different place now. And as cool as it is to work for a company that I believe in the branding and the messaging, I also don't like being beholden to someone, essentially. Like, it was starting to feel like a job, whereas before I felt like I was having fun, I was helping people. Now it felt like a corporate 9 to 5. It just slowly started feeling like I had to check in, I had to do certain things, which was the job. And I started to realize I hated that feeling. Like I didn't get into this business to feel like I had to answer to a manager or to a boss. And I was starting to feel that way. Part of it was the company was restructuring because they were growing. They were going to be doing some new things. There was more stuff coming onto my plate, and it started to feel like not what I wanted anymore. And, I approached the owners and I was like, hey, really grateful for everything you guys have done for me, everything you've helped me with, but I am like, I'm out. I need to go do something else. I don't know exactly what it is. They were really cool about it, super supportive. They taught me so, like, they were great mentors to have. So when I knew that like that journey was coming to an end and I was good to start thinking about the next thing, it was like, I think November, December, sometime between October and December of 2021, when I was like thinking the next move. And that's when I realized like, it's time for me to do the things I've been wanting to do that I haven't done. And that's like start a YouTube channel, build something to where I can help people in the way that I wish I would have had helped from a different perspective in the industry. Because there's so many outlets for audio production and music production, but everyone's take on it is always different, which is good. Like we should have different takes on everything. But I've never seen too many people kind of been like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast that just talks about how the audio, like everything's always like, what should people do? What should people prepare for? What's some advice? I'm like, I want to do that, but I also want to be honest about like working in this industry, just like any other industry, sucks. Because there's so many things you don't know, so many things that happen that you wish wouldn't happen. Like it doesn't need to be put in a positive spotlight like different industries, when in reality, like I think enough of us are self-aware to realize like, yeah, there's a lot of crap in this industry that sucks. Like, let's be honest about it. Let's have the conversation. Let's help each other out. Why do people have to pay dues? If it's like the whole pay dues doesn't make sense to me. It's like, but what if you're good enough that you don't need to pay dues for years? You can pay them for months. If someone just gives you a shot and coach and like gives you just a little bit that you need to excel, and then you just take off. Because I've always been that way. I'm like, I just need to be shown the way a little bit, and I'll figure out the rest for myself. Like things will start clicking. Not everyone's like that, and I get it. But I don't believe in like you have to like grind your nose to the ground for 5 years before you get ahead anywhere. It's like, what? This makes no sense. Why would we do this? This makes no sense to me. So I was like, okay, if I really want to do this, now's the time to do this. I have crazy amount of experience in this industry. I was really lucky with like the 5 years of everything that happened. I was very, very fortunate, lucky to be like essentially in the right places at the right time, learning the right things, the right skill sets. And it's like, okay, how do I build my own thing for myself that helps other people, but also sustainable to like pay for my life essentially. And then like once I kind of mapped out, the first thing that I was avoiding, it was like, okay, it's time to start a YouTube channel. But then I was scared because I've never done video. Well, I've been on video with the previous company, but I had never like edited my own video, and I didn't really quite know what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. But I was like, I'm just going to start and I will figure it out. And as soon as I started, then I started realizing, oh, actually, this is how things started coming into how I wanted to form and make this media company grow and work. And then it's just like within 3 months, like I was like, okay, this is how I see everything. This is going to take 5 to 10 years to build. Are you good with that? Like I had that conversation and I was like, I think I am. Like this is the move. And if I woke up every single day and this is what I had to do, I think this is what I would want to do. I would be super happy just helping people, learning, and then bringing other people to help teach people in a different perspective, in a different way. So yeah, that's all I mean, this could have been a much longer story, but these like pivotal events kind of what led me to starting the Plug-in Alley YouTube channel, the media company, the business, and then, this podcast. And it's all to just help people get the information that helps them excel in this business from someone who came from nothing, from a small town, and got lucky and is now sharing all the information instead of hoarding it. Because that's what sucks about working in music. So many people just hoard all the information. Like it's a golden ticket that if they give to anyone else, their whole careers will go up in flames, when it's just not the case. It's just, there's just too much to go around. There's no reason for anyone to be selfish with it. The only reason to be selfish with it is because literally it's just, I feel it's an insecurity. And not everyone's going to, like, I can teach you how to EQ something. Doesn't mean that you're going to EQ every single time that way, or you're going to hear the EQ the same way that I hear it. It's the reason why you see so many different settings, and you can have 5 mixers mix the same song. You will be amazed at how many different settings you will see because of just how different people's approaches and ways they hear are. So I don't think it's something that needs to be, hidden from everyone. But thank you for listening to this very long episode of me talking about my story and journey. Maybe I'll go into deeper on some of the other stuff in a future episode, but I just wanted to take a time out, talk about my journey a little bit further, so that wherever you are, whoever's listening, you understand where I'm coming from and my mindset, and it's very transparent. And hopefully if you find yourself in a little part of that story, it helps you just like keep going. Don't be afraid to take a break if you need a break. Don't be afraid to sell everything and then build it all back, because you can if you're determined. And hopefully with this episode, whatever struggle you're going through, you don't have to struggle with anymore. And that's it for now, my friends. Until next time.